Question 1. Research into the Altai State Pedagogical University's entrance examination process has revealed potential irregularities in the administration of a recent examination, including allegations of unauthorized access to examination materials prior to the scheduled time. Which of the following approaches best upholds the principles of academic integrity and the regulatory framework of the Altai State Pedagogical University? Option A. Proposing to re-administer the entire examination for all candidates to ensure absolute fairness, regardless of whether specific evidence of widespread compromise has been found. Option B. Immediately launching a comprehensive and documented investigation into the alleged irregularities, gathering all pertinent evidence, and reviewing it against the university's established policies on examination integrity and academic misconduct. Option C. Conducting a series of informal interviews with a select group of faculty members to gauge their general opinion on the examination's fairness, and based on this, deciding whether further action is warranted. Option D. Issuing a general statement to all candidates acknowledging that minor administrative issues may have occurred, but assuring them that the overall integrity of the examination was maintained, without specific investigation. Correct answer is B. Immediately launching a comprehensive and documented investigation into the alleged irregularities, gathering all pertinent evidence, and reviewing it against the university's established policies on examination integrity and academic misconduct. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's stated commitment to academic integrity and the practical pressures of student performance and institutional reputation. The entrance exam is a critical gatekeeping mechanism, and ensuring its fairness and validity is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold rigorous academic standards with the potential for external influences or internal biases to compromise the integrity of the assessment process. Careful judgment is required to identify and address any potential breaches of these standards. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective, and documented investigation into the alleged irregularities. This means gathering all relevant evidence, including examination materials, student records, and any witness statements, and analyzing them impartially. The process must adhere strictly to the Altai State Pedagogical University's internal regulations concerning academic misconduct and examination procedures. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which are foundational to any reputable educational institution. By following established procedures and relying on evidence, the university can make an informed and defensible decision, thereby safeguarding the credibility of its entrance examinations and upholding its commitment to academic excellence. This aligns with the university's regulatory framework, which mandates fair and unbiased assessment practices. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the allegations without a proper investigation. This fails to uphold the university's responsibility to ensure the integrity of its admissions process and could lead to the admission of unqualified candidates or the rejection of deserving ones based on flawed results. Such inaction would violate the spirit and likely the letter of the university's regulations on academic integrity and fair assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to implement punitive measures against students or staff without concrete evidence of wrongdoing. This demonstrates a lack of due process and could result in unjust consequences, damaging the reputation of the university and creating a climate of distrust. Would also contravene the university's internal policies that require evidence-based decision-making in cases of alleged misconduct. A third incorrect approach would be to alter examination results retroactively to meet certain performance benchmarks or quotas. This is a direct violation of academic integrity and constitutes a fraudulent act. It undermines the entire purpose of the entrance examination as a measure of a candidate's preparedness and ability, and would be a severe breach of the university's ethical and regulatory obligations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Acknowledge and document all allegations promptly. 2. Initiate a formal investigation in accordance with established university policies and procedures. 3. Gather and preserve all relevant evidence objectively. 4. Analyze the evidence impartially, seeking to establish facts rather than assumptions. 5. Consult with relevant university authorities and legal counsel if necessary. 6. Make decisions based solely on the findings of the investigation and the university's regulatory framework. 7. Communicate findings and decisions transparently and appropriately. 8. Implement corrective actions or sanctions as dictated by the findings and regulations. Question 2. System analysis indicates that an applicant for the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance examination has submitted incomplete documentation for one of the required academic prerequisites, citing a recent personal emergency. The applicant has provided a brief explanation, but no supporting official documentation for the emergency. According to the Altai State Pedagogical University's regulatory framework for entrance examinations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Reject the application immediately due to the incomplete documentation, as per the standard procedure for all applications. Option B. Contact the applicant's previous educational institution to verify the reasons for the incomplete documentation without informing the applicant. Option C. Proceed with the application, making a note of the incomplete documentation and the applicant's explanation, assuming the emergency is valid. Option D. Request the applicant to provide official supporting documentation for the personal emergency and defer a final decision until such documentation is received and reviewed against the university's regulations. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the application, making a note of the incomplete documentation and the applicant's explanation, assuming the emergency is valid. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a candidate's personal circumstances and the university's established admission criteria, as outlined by the Altai State Pedagogical University's regulatory framework for entrance examinations. The challenge lies in balancing empathy and understanding for the applicant's situation with the imperative to uphold the integrity and fairness of the admission process. A decision must be made that is both compassionate and strictly compliant with the university's regulations, ensuring no undue advantage is given and that all applicants are assessed on a level playing field. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's documentation against the specific requirements stipulated in the Altai State Pedagogical University's entrance examination regulations. This includes verifying the completeness and authenticity of all submitted documents, assessing whether the applicant meets the academic prerequisites, and confirming adherence to any special category admission criteria, if applicable. The justification for this approach lies in its direct adherence to the Altai State Pedagogical University's established admission policies, which are designed to ensure a fair and objective selection process. By strictly following these regulations, the university upholds its commitment to meritocracy and equal opportunity for all prospective students. This methodical and rule-based assessment prevents subjective biases from influencing the outcome and maintains the credibility of the entrance examination. An incorrect approach would be to grant admission based solely on the applicant's personal hardship, without a clear regulatory basis within the Altai State Pedagogical University's framework. This fails to acknowledge the established admission criteria and could be perceived as preferential treatment, undermining the fairness of the process for other applicants who have met all requirements. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the application outright without a comprehensive review of all submitted documents and a thorough understanding of the university's regulations regarding extenuating circumstances, if any are provided for. This could lead to overlooking valid reasons for certain discrepancies, or a failure to apply any discretionary clauses that might exist within the university's policy. A third incorrect approach would be to seek informal advice from colleagues outside the official admission committee, or to make a decision based on personal acquaintance with the applicant, as this bypasses the established procedural safeguards and introduces potential for bias and inconsistency, violating the principles of transparency and accountability mandated by university governance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the applicant's case against the explicit provisions of the Altai State Pedagogical University's entrance examination regulations. This includes identifying any relevant clauses that address exceptional circumstances, ensuring all documentation is properly verified, and consulting with the designated admissions committee or relevant university authorities for clarification or approval of any deviations from standard procedure. The focus must always remain on adherence to the established legal and regulatory framework of the university. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that the integrity of university admissions processes is paramount for maintaining public trust and academic standards. In the context of the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance examinations, which of the following approaches best upholds these principles when an applicant's relative is a member of the university's admissions committee? Option A. The admissions committee member recuses themselves from any discussion or decision-making concerning the applicant's admission, and the applicant is evaluated solely based on objective examination results and established criteria by an independent subcommittee. Option B. The admissions committee member shares internal information about the examination difficulty and scoring trends with their relative to help them prepare better. Option C. The admissions committee member uses their influence to ensure their relative is placed in a favorable cohort or program, regardless of their examination scores. Option D. The admissions committee member advocates for their relative, highlighting their perceived strengths and potential contributions to the university to ensure they receive fair consideration. The correct answer is A. The admissions committee member recuses themselves from any discussion or decision-making concerning the applicant's admission, and the applicant is evaluated solely based on objective examination results and established criteria by an independent subcommittee. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an understanding of the ethical obligations and regulatory expectations placed upon individuals involved in the admissions process at an educational institution like Altai State Pedagogical University. The core challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair and merit-based admissions with the potential for undue influence or perceived favoritism. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all applicants are evaluated according to established criteria, without bias or external pressure. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the Altai State Pedagogical University's admission regulations and ethical guidelines. This means ensuring that all decisions are based solely on the applicant's academic qualifications, performance in entrance examinations, and other objective criteria as defined by the university. It also entails maintaining confidentiality and transparency in the process, avoiding any actions that could be construed as preferential treatment or a conflict of interest. This aligns with the university's responsibility to uphold academic integrity and provide equal opportunities to all prospective students, as mandated by educational laws and internal university policies governing admissions. An incorrect approach that involves considering personal connections or offering special considerations outside of the established admission criteria would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such actions undermine the fairness of the admissions process, potentially leading to the admission of less qualified candidates and the rejection of more deserving ones. This violates the principles of meritocracy and equal opportunity and could contravene specific clauses within the Altai State Pedagogical University's charter or the broader Russian Federation's educational legislation that governs admissions procedures. Furthermore, it could lead to reputational damage for the university and legal challenges from aggrieved applicants. Another incorrect approach, such as disclosing confidential applicant information to unauthorized individuals, would be a breach of privacy regulations and university policy. This could expose the university to legal liability and erode trust among applicants and the wider community. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's admission policies and ethical code. When faced with a situation that might compromise these standards, a professional should: 1. Consult the relevant university regulations and guidelines. 2. Seek clarification from superiors or the admissions committee if the situation is ambiguous. 3. Prioritize fairness, objectivity, and adherence to established procedures above all else. 4. Document all decisions and actions taken to ensure accountability. 5. Refuse any requests that would violate ethical or regulatory standards. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that a private educational services company, which actively recruits students for its preparatory courses for the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance examination, has offered a substantial sponsorship package to the university. The university administration is keen to accept this sponsorship to fund new academic facilities. What is the most appropriate course of action for the university's admissions committee to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process? Option A. Accept the sponsorship and implement a general code of conduct for the sponsoring company, assuming their commitment to ethical practices. Option B. Reject the sponsorship outright due to the inherent conflict of interest, regardless of the potential benefits to the university. Option C. Accept the sponsorship and allow the sponsoring company to provide input on the examination format to ensure it aligns with their preparatory course curriculum. Option D. Negotiate a sponsorship agreement that includes stringent, verifiable clauses explicitly prohibiting any access to examination materials, candidate data, or influence over examination content or administration, and establish an independent oversight committee to monitor compliance. The correct answer is A. Accept the sponsorship and implement a general code of conduct for the sponsoring company, assuming their commitment to ethical practices. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The university administration's pressure to secure sponsorship from a private educational services company, which also offers preparatory courses for the entrance exam, creates a potential for undue influence and bias. This situation requires careful judgment to uphold the principles of fairness, transparency, and equal opportunity for all applicants, as mandated by the Altai State Pedagogical University's regulatory framework for entrance examinations. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination above any potential financial benefits from sponsorship. This means rigorously assessing the sponsorship proposal to ensure it does not compromise the examination's impartiality, confidentiality, or the equal standing of all candidates. Specifically, it requires establishing clear guidelines and safeguards to prevent any conflict of interest, such as ensuring the sponsoring company has no access to examination content, question papers, or candidate data, and that their involvement does not translate into preferential treatment for their preparatory course students. This aligns with the overarching regulatory goal of ensuring a merit-based selection process, free from external pressures or perceived advantages. An incorrect approach would be to accept the sponsorship without adequate scrutiny, or to implement superficial safeguards that do not genuinely mitigate the risk of bias. For instance, accepting the sponsorship and assuming that the company will act ethically without explicit contractual obligations and independent oversight would be a failure. This overlooks the regulatory requirement for proactive risk management and the establishment of robust controls to prevent even the appearance of impropriety. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the financial gain over the examination's integrity, perhaps by allowing the sponsoring company to influence the examination content or format, or to gain access to candidate information. This directly violates the ethical principles of fairness and equal opportunity, and would likely contravene specific regulations governing the conduct of entrance examinations, which are designed to protect the interests of all applicants. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest and their implications. This involves consulting relevant university regulations, ethical codes, and legal frameworks governing educational admissions. The next step is to assess the risks associated with each potential course of action, considering the impact on all stakeholders, particularly the applicants. A thorough risk assessment should inform the development of mitigation strategies, which must be clearly defined, documented, and implemented. Finally, ongoing monitoring and evaluation are crucial to ensure that the chosen approach remains effective in safeguarding the integrity of the examination process. Question 5. Regulatory review indicates that an applicant for the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance examination has a close family member who is a member of the university's admissions committee responsible for overseeing the examination process. The family member has no direct role in grading or evaluating this specific applicant's examination. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct approach for the applicant to take? Option A. Assume the relationship poses no conflict of interest as the family member is not directly involved in the applicant's assessment, and proceed with the examination without disclosure. Option B. Attempt to subtly inform the family member about the examination schedule and content to ensure they are aware of the applicant's participation. Option C. Proactively disclose the familial relationship to the university's admissions committee and await their guidance on any necessary steps. Option D. Ignore the familial relationship and hope it does not become an issue during or after the examination. The correct answer is C. Proactively disclose the familial relationship to the university's admissions committee and await their guidance on any necessary steps. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an applicant to Altai State Pedagogical University due to the need to understand and apply the university's specific entrance examination regulations, particularly concerning the ethical conduct of applicants. The challenge lies in navigating potential conflicts of interest or perceived impropriety that could arise from personal connections, even if no explicit rule is broken. Careful judgment is required to ensure that actions are not only compliant with the letter of the law, but also uphold the spirit of fairness and academic integrity expected in an entrance examination. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing any potential conflict of interest to the examination committee. This demonstrates transparency, respect for the examination process, and a commitment to ethical conduct. By informing the university authorities, the applicant allows them to assess the situation and implement appropriate measures, if any, to maintain the integrity of the examination. This aligns with the general principles of academic honesty and the specific regulations of Altai State Pedagogical University that likely emphasize fairness and impartiality in admissions. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a personal relationship with an examiner, without any direct involvement in the applicant's assessment, poses no issue. This fails to recognize the potential for perceived bias, which can undermine the credibility of the examination process. It also neglects the university's right and responsibility to manage its admissions procedures free from any appearance of impropriety. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to leverage the personal relationship to gain an advantage, even subtly. This is a direct violation of ethical principles and likely contravenes specific regulations against seeking undue influence or engaging in dishonest practices during the entrance examination. Such an action would demonstrate a severe lack of integrity and a disregard for the fairness expected of all applicants. A further incorrect approach would be to ignore the relationship entirely and proceed as if it does not exist, hoping it goes unnoticed. This is a passive form of dishonesty, as it involves withholding relevant information that could impact the perception of fairness. It also misses an opportunity to proactively address a potential issue, leaving the applicant vulnerable to accusations of attempting to conceal a conflict. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of any personal connections that might be perceived as influencing the examination process. If such a connection exists, the applicant should err on the side of caution and disclose it to the relevant university authorities. This allows for an informed decision by the institution and demonstrates the applicant's commitment to ethical conduct and academic integrity. The guiding principle is to uphold fairness and transparency in all aspects of the examination process. Question 6. Consider a scenario where an applicant for a program at Altai State Pedagogical University submits an application that, while meeting the minimum academic requirements, lacks a specific extracurricular achievement mentioned as a desirable, though not mandatory, criterion in the admission guidelines. The applicant's accompanying personal statement strongly emphasizes extenuating personal circumstances that have limited their opportunities for such achievements. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Prioritize the applicant's personal statement and extenuating circumstances, granting admission based on the perceived hardship and potential, even if it means overlooking the absence of the desirable extracurricular achievement. Option B. Inform the applicant that they do not fully meet the desirable criteria and therefore cannot be considered for admission, without further review of their personal statement or other aspects of their application. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application package, including their personal statement and any supporting documentation, to assess their overall suitability for the program, while strictly adhering to the published admission criteria and giving due weight to the extenuating circumstances as presented. Option D. Seek informal advice from a senior faculty member outside the admissions committee on how to handle this specific applicant's case, without formally documenting this consultation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application package, including their personal statement and any supporting documentation, to assess their overall suitability for the program, while strictly adhering to the published admission criteria and giving due weight to the extenuating circumstances as presented. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of educational admissions while facing potential external pressures. The core difficulty lies in balancing the university's stated admission criteria with the personal circumstances of an applicant, ensuring fairness and adherence to established procedures. Careful judgment is required to avoid bias and uphold the integrity of the entrance examination process. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's submitted documents against the Altai State Pedagogical University's admission regulations. This approach is right because it prioritizes adherence to the established legal and regulatory framework governing entrance examinations. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of transparency, fairness, and equal opportunity mandated by the Altai State Pedagogical University's internal regulations and potentially broader Russian Federation educational laws concerning admissions. By focusing on documented evidence and established criteria, this method ensures that decisions are impartial and defensible, preventing subjective influences from compromising the admission process. An incorrect approach that involves prioritizing the applicant's personal narrative over documented qualifications fails because it bypasses the established regulatory framework. This constitutes an ethical failure by potentially creating an unfair advantage for one applicant over others who met the stated requirements. It also represents a regulatory failure by deviating from the university's admission policies, which are designed to ensure a standardized and objective evaluation process. Another incorrect approach, which involves seeking informal influence or bypassing official channels to advocate for the applicant, is professionally unacceptable. This is an ethical failure as it undermines the integrity of the admission process by introducing personal connections and potentially corrupting the merit-based system. It is also a regulatory failure because it circumvents the established procedures for application review and decision-making, which are designed to be transparent and accountable. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant university regulations and any applicable national educational laws. Professionals must first identify the objective criteria for admission. They should then meticulously evaluate the applicant's submission against these criteria, relying solely on documented evidence. If there are ambiguities or exceptional circumstances that warrant consideration, these should be addressed through the formal, established channels for appeals or special review, as outlined in the university's policies, rather than through informal or subjective means. The ultimate decision must be justifiable based on the regulations and the evidence presented. Question 7. Compliance review shows that the Altai State Pedagogical University is considering a new interdisciplinary program. To assess the potential impact of this program on prospective students and the university's academic standing, which of the following assessment approaches would be most professionally sound and ethically justifiable? Option A. An assessment that exclusively analyzes the cost-effectiveness of the program, comparing its expenses to the expected financial returns without considering its educational value or student experience. Option B. A comprehensive impact assessment that gathers quantitative data on projected student outcomes, qualitative feedback from potential students and faculty on curriculum relevance and support structures, and an analysis of resource allocation. Option C. An assessment focused primarily on projected enrollment figures and the potential for increased tuition revenue, assuming that higher enrollment automatically signifies positive program impact. Option D. An assessment based solely on informal discussions with a few current students from related disciplines to gauge their general opinions about interdisciplinary studies. The correct answer is B. A comprehensive impact assessment that gathers quantitative data on projected student outcomes, qualitative feedback from potential students and faculty on curriculum relevance and support structures, and an analysis of resource allocation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to critically evaluate the effectiveness and ethical implications of different approaches to assessing the impact of a proposed educational program. The challenge lies in discerning which approach aligns best with the principles of responsible program development and evaluation, particularly within the context of university entrance requirements, which often prioritize evidence-based decision-making and student well-being. Careful judgment is required to avoid superficial assessments or those that could inadvertently disadvantage prospective students. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted impact assessment that considers both quantitative and qualitative data, and crucially, incorporates feedback from key stakeholders, including prospective students and faculty. This approach is right because it adheres to best practices in educational program evaluation, which emphasize a holistic understanding of potential effects. Specifically, within the framework of university entrance exams and program development, this method ensures that decisions are informed by a realistic understanding of how the program will affect student learning, engagement, and overall university experience. It also aligns with ethical considerations of transparency and fairness in the admissions process. An approach that focuses solely on projected enrollment numbers, while seemingly practical, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It prioritizes institutional metrics over the actual educational impact and student experience, potentially leading to a program that is not pedagogically sound or supportive of student success. This overlooks the core purpose of an educational institution. An approach that relies exclusively on anecdotal evidence from a small group of current students is also professionally unacceptable. While anecdotal feedback can be valuable, it lacks the rigor and representativeness needed for a formal impact assessment. This approach is susceptible to bias and may not reflect the diverse needs and experiences of the wider prospective student population, failing to meet standards of objective evaluation. An approach that only considers the financial implications of the program, without assessing its educational value or student impact, demonstrates a failure to uphold the primary mission of a pedagogical university. This narrow focus prioritizes economic viability over educational quality and student welfare, which is a fundamental ethical breach in an academic setting. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured framework that prioritizes evidence-based evaluation, ethical considerations, and stakeholder engagement. Professionals should first clearly define the objectives of the assessment, then identify relevant data sources and methodologies, ensuring a balance between quantitative and qualitative measures. They must critically evaluate the potential biases and limitations of each data source and methodology. Finally, they should synthesize findings to make recommendations that are not only practical, but also ethically sound and aligned with the institution's mission and values, particularly concerning the well-being and academic success of prospective students. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that a proposed upgrade to the Altai State Pedagogical University's applicant data management system might streamline the admissions process, but could also introduce new vulnerabilities in data security and privacy. Which approach best addresses the potential ramifications of this system upgrade? Option A. Rely solely on the IT department's assurance that the new system is secure, without further independent review or impact analysis. Option B. Proceed with the upgrade immediately to leverage its efficiency benefits, addressing any security concerns that arise post-implementation. Option C. Implement the upgrade with minimal testing, assuming that standard security protocols will be sufficient to protect applicant data. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security impact assessment involving legal counsel and IT security specialists to identify risks and develop mitigation strategies before implementation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security impact assessment involving legal counsel and IT security specialists to identify risks and develop mitigation strategies before implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the sensitive nature of student data and the potential for misuse or unauthorized access. Maintaining confidentiality and adhering to data protection regulations are paramount. The university entrance exam context requires a rigorous approach to ensure the integrity of the admissions process and the privacy of applicants. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic assessment of the potential impact of any proposed changes to the student data management system on applicant privacy and data security. This includes identifying all stakeholders, potential risks, and mitigation strategies, and ensuring compliance with Altai State Pedagogical University's internal regulations and relevant Russian Federation laws concerning personal data. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the protection of sensitive information, aligns with ethical obligations to applicants, and adheres to legal mandates for data handling. It demonstrates a proactive and responsible method for evaluating changes that could affect a large number of individuals. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with changes without a formal impact assessment. This failure stems from a disregard for data protection principles and potential legal ramifications. It risks unauthorized access, data breaches, and noncompliance with regulations such as Federal Law No. 152 FZ on personal data. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers technical aspects without evaluating the broader ethical and privacy implications for applicants. This oversight would lead to a failure to identify and address critical risks, potentially exposing the university to legal penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape and ethical obligations. This involves identifying the scope of the proposed action, assessing potential risks to data privacy and security, consulting relevant policies and laws, and developing a comprehensive impact assessment report. This report should inform the final decision, ensuring that any changes are implemented only after all potential negative consequences have been adequately addressed and mitigated. Question 9. The analysis reveals that the Altai State Pedagogical University is seeking to refine its entrance examination process to better identify candidates with strong pedagogical potential while ensuring fairness and minimizing applicant anxiety. Considering the university's regulatory framework and ethical commitments, which of the following approaches would be most appropriate for developing a new entrance assessment strategy? Option A. Introducing a single, high-stakes written examination that covers a broad range of academic subjects, with a significantly higher weighting than any other component. Option B. Streamlining the application review to prioritize speed, focusing primarily on the number of completed application forms processed within a set time frame. Option C. Developing a subjective essay question that requires candidates to reflect on their personal motivations for teaching, with grading based on the emotional resonance of their writing. Option D. Implementing a multi-stage assessment process that includes a review of academic records, a structured interview designed to evaluate communication and problem-solving skills relevant to teaching, and a practical task simulating a classroom scenario. The correct answer is D. Implementing a multi-stage assessment process that includes a review of academic records, a structured interview designed to evaluate communication and problem-solving skills relevant to teaching, and a practical task simulating a classroom scenario. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for educational institutions, balancing the need for robust academic assessment with the ethical imperative to ensure fairness and prevent undue stress on applicants. The Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations, like those of many accredited institutions, emphasize a holistic evaluation process that considers a candidate's potential and preparedness without resorting to methods that could be deemed discriminatory or overly burdensome. The challenge lies in designing an assessment that accurately reflects a student's aptitude for pedagogical studies, while adhering to the university's commitment to equitable access and applicant well-being. The correct approach involves a multifaceted assessment that considers a range of factors beyond a single, high-stakes examination. This aligns with the Altai State Pedagogical University's stated commitment to identifying well-rounded individuals suited for teaching. Specifically, it would involve a combination of academic performance indicators, such as previous grades, a well-structured interview process designed to gauge communication skills and pedagogical inclination, and potentially a portfolio showcasing relevant experiences or creative work. This approach is ethically sound as it provides multiple opportunities for candidates to demonstrate their suitability, mitigating the risk of a single poor performance unfairly disqualifying a promising applicant. It also aligns with the university's regulatory framework by focusing on comprehensive evaluation rather than narrow, potentially anxiety-inducing metrics. An approach that relies solely on a single, highly intensive written examination, while seemingly objective, fails to meet the ethical and regulatory standards for a comprehensive entrance exam. Such a method risks creating undue stress and anxiety for applicants, potentially hindering their performance and not accurately reflecting their true capabilities. This could be seen as a failure to provide equitable access, as it disproportionately penalizes students who may perform poorly under extreme pressure, regardless of their underlying potential. Furthermore, it neglects the qualitative aspects of pedagogical aptitude, such as interpersonal skills and critical thinking in practical scenarios, which are crucial for future educators and are better assessed through methods like interviews. Another incorrect approach would be to introduce a subjective essay component that is not clearly defined or graded with objective criteria. This opens the door to potential bias and inconsistency in evaluation, undermining the fairness and transparency expected of an entrance examination. The university's regulations implicitly require a degree of standardization and objectivity to ensure all candidates are assessed on a level playing field. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of processing applications over the thoroughness of assessment would be detrimental. This could involve a superficial review of documents or a rushed interview process, leading to potentially inaccurate judgments about a candidate's suitability. The university's mandate is to select qualified individuals, and this requires a diligent and comprehensive evaluation process. The professional decision-making process for such situations involves a careful consideration of the university's mission, its regulatory obligations, and ethical principles. Professionals must ask, does this assessment method accurately measure the desired competencies? Is it fair and equitable to all applicants? Does it align with the university's stated values and legal requirements? By systematically evaluating potential assessment strategies against these criteria, one can arrive at a decision that is both effective and ethically sound. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a potential concern regarding the originality of a candidate's submitted essay for the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam. While the essay demonstrates strong conceptual understanding, a preliminary review suggests certain passages bear a striking resemblance to publicly available academic commentary on the same topic, raising questions about potential plagiarism or unauthorized collaboration. The examination regulations of Altai State Pedagogical University strictly prohibit plagiarism and require all submitted work to be the candidate's own original creation. Considering these regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Immediately disqualify the candidate's essay based on the initial suspicion of resemblance, without further investigation, to maintain the perceived integrity of the examination. Option B. Conduct a detailed comparative analysis of the candidate's essay against the suspected source materials, referencing specific clauses within the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations on academic integrity and originality, and if necessary, consult with the examination board for a definitive ruling. Option C. Advise the candidate to revise the essay to remove any perceived similarities, allowing them to resubmit before the final decision, without a formal investigation into the original submission. Option D. Accept the essay as is, given the candidate's strong conceptual understanding, and assume the resemblance is coincidental, prioritizing admission of promising students. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed comparative analysis of the candidate's essay against the suspected source materials, referencing specific clauses within the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations on academic integrity and originality, and if necessary, consult with the examination board for a definitive ruling. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an educator to interpret and apply university entrance examination regulations in a situation where a candidate's submission might be perceived as borderline or potentially violating academic integrity. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to uphold the integrity of the examination process with fairness to the candidate, especially when the evidence is not definitively conclusive. Careful judgment is required to avoid both undue leniency and unfair penalization. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective review of the candidate's submission against the specific guidelines of the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations concerning originality and academic integrity. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the principle of fair and consistent application of examination rules. The Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations, as per their stated framework, would mandate that all submitted work must be original and free from plagiarism or unauthorized assistance. Therefore, a systematic evaluation of the submission against these explicit criteria, potentially involving consultation with examination board members if ambiguity persists, is the only procedurally sound and ethically defensible method. This ensures that the decision is based on established rules, not subjective interpretation or external pressure. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the submission solely based on a superficial resemblance to existing materials, without a detailed comparative analysis against the exam's specific originality requirements. This fails to uphold the principle of due process for the candidate and risks an arbitrary decision. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the potential issue due to the candidate's perceived potential or the pressure to admit students, which constitutes a failure to adhere to the examination's integrity standards and an ethical lapse in maintaining a fair competitive environment. Finally, an approach that involves seeking external opinions from individuals not authorized by the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations to interpret or adjudicate such matters would be incorrect, as it bypasses the established internal review mechanisms and could introduce bias or misinterpretation of the specific exam rules. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulation, objective evidence, and procedural fairness. This involves 1. Understanding the specific rules and guidelines of the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam thoroughly. 2. Gathering all relevant evidence pertaining to the candidate's submission. 3. Conducting an objective and systematic analysis of the evidence against the established rules. 4. Consulting with designated examination authorities or committees if ambiguity or complexity arises. 5. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. This structured approach ensures that decisions are defensible, consistent, and uphold the integrity of the examination process. Question 11. To address the challenge of a prospective student at Altai State Pedagogical University expressing significant personal difficulties that they believe will impede their performance on the upcoming entrance examination, what is the most appropriate course of action for an admissions officer to take, strictly adhering to the university's regulatory framework for entrance exams? Option A. Inform the student about the university's official policy on examination accommodations, advising them to submit a formal request with supporting documentation to the examination committee for review, while emphasizing the importance of maintaining the integrity and fairness of the examination for all applicants. Option B. Grant the student an extended deadline for submitting their application materials and a modified examination format without consulting university policy or the examination committee, based on the student's expressed hardship. Option C. Discuss the student's personal situation with other faculty members involved in the admissions process to gather opinions on how to best handle the case, without directly informing the student of this consultation. Option D. Advise the student that personal difficulties are not grounds for special consideration in the entrance examination, and that they must perform to the best of their ability under the standard conditions. The correct answer is A. Inform the student about the university's official policy on examination accommodations, advising them to submit a formal request with supporting documentation to the examination committee for review, while emphasizing the importance of maintaining the integrity and fairness of the examination for all applicants. Explanation. The scenario presents a common ethical dilemma for educators, balancing the need for academic integrity with supporting a student facing personal hardship. The challenge lies in discerning when accommodation crosses the line into unfair advantage, potentially compromising the validity of the entrance examination process. Careful judgment is required to uphold the university's standards while demonstrating empathy. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes fairness and adherence to Altai State Pedagogical University's established regulations for entrance examinations. This approach acknowledges the student's situation, but insists on maintaining the integrity of the assessment process. It involves a direct and transparent conversation with the student about the university's policies regarding accommodations and the importance of equal opportunity for all applicants. Furthermore, it necessitates consulting the relevant internal university guidelines or the examination committee to determine if any formal, documented accommodations are permissible under specific circumstances, such as documented medical conditions, and ensuring any such accommodations are applied consistently and fairly to all eligible applicants. This upholds the principle of meritocracy and prevents any perception of bias or preferential treatment, which is crucial for the credibility of the entrance examination. An incorrect approach would be to grant an extension or modify the examination format without proper authorization or adherence to university policy. This bypasses established procedures and could be seen as favoritism, undermining the fairness of the examination for other candidates. It also fails to address the root cause of the student's difficulty in a structured, policy-compliant manner. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the student's concerns outright without exploring any potential, policy-compliant avenues for support. While maintaining integrity is paramount, a complete lack of empathy or willingness to investigate permissible accommodations could be seen as unprofessional and lacking in the supportive ethos expected of an educational institution. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the student's personal situation with other applicants or faculty members not directly involved in the admission process. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and is ethically unacceptable, creating an unprofessional and potentially damaging environment. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to the Altai State Pedagogical University's entrance examination regulations and any associated internal guidelines on student support and accommodations. 2. Engaging in a direct, respectful, and confidential conversation with the student to understand their situation and explain the university's policies. 3. Consulting with the appropriate university authorities, e.g., admissions committee, examination board, to determine if any formal, documented accommodations are permissible and how they should be implemented. 4. Ensuring any approved accommodations are applied equitably to all eligible applicants. 5. Maintaining strict confidentiality regarding the student's personal circumstances. Question 12. The review process indicates that an applicant for the Altai State Pedagogical University's Bachelor of Education program has presented a transcript from a foreign institution with a grading system that differs significantly from the standard Russian scale. The admissions committee member responsible for evaluating this application is unsure how to accurately convert these grades to determine if the applicant meets the minimum academic entry requirements as stipulated by the university's admission regulations. Which of the following actions best represents the appropriate professional response according to the Altai State Pedagogical University's admission framework? Option A. Assign a grade conversion based on a general understanding of international grading systems, assuming a common equivalence that is not explicitly supported by Altai State Pedagogical University's official documentation. Option B. Inform the applicant that their transcript cannot be evaluated due to the unfamiliar grading system and suggest they reapply with a transcript from a Russian institution. Option C. Make a subjective assessment of the applicant's academic performance based on the perceived rigor of the foreign institution and the applicant's overall application, without a standardized conversion of their grades. Option D. Consult the official Altai State Pedagogical University admission regulations and any supplementary guidelines or official equivalency tables provided by the university for converting foreign grading systems. If no specific guidance exists, seek formal clarification from the university's Academic Affairs Department or the Admissions Committee Chair regarding the established procedure for grade conversion or the need for an external credential evaluation. The correct answer is D. Consult the official Altai State Pedagogical University admission regulations and any supplementary guidelines or official equivalency tables provided by the university for converting foreign grading systems. If no specific guidance exists, seek formal clarification from the university's Academic Affairs Department or the Admissions Committee Chair regarding the established procedure for grade conversion or the need for an external credential evaluation. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential discrepancy in how an applicant's prior academic achievements are being evaluated for admission to the Altai State Pedagogical University. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires adherence to the university's specific admission regulations, while also ensuring fairness and transparency in the evaluation process. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to incorrect admissions decisions, potentially impacting the university's academic standards and the applicant's future. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for consistent application of rules with the nuances of individual applicant profiles. The correct approach involves a thorough examination of the applicant's submitted documents against the explicit criteria outlined in the Altai State Pedagogical University's admission regulations for prior academic achievements. This includes verifying the equivalence of foreign qualifications if applicable, ensuring all required documentation is present and accurate, and applying the established grading conversion scales or recognition procedures as stipulated by the university. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the university's governing documents, ensuring that all applicants are assessed according to the same predefined standards. This upholds the principle of procedural fairness and the integrity of the admission process, as mandated by the university's internal regulations and educational policies. An incorrect approach would be to make an arbitrary decision based on a general understanding of academic merit, without consulting the specific Altai State Pedagogical University admission regulations. This fails to adhere to the established legal and regulatory framework governing admissions, potentially leading to inconsistent and unfair evaluations. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the applicant's perceived potential over the documented evidence of their prior academic achievements, as defined by the university's criteria. This bypasses the regulatory requirements for qualification assessment and introduces subjective bias, undermining the objective standards set by the university. A further incorrect approach would be to accept incomplete documentation without seeking clarification or requiring the applicant to provide the necessary supporting evidence as per the university's stated requirements. This violates the principle of due diligence and can lead to admitting students who do not meet the foundational academic prerequisites, thereby compromising the quality of education. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the Altai State Pedagogical University's admission regulations. This involves consulting the official admission guidelines, any relevant internal policies, and directives from the Ministry of Education of the Russian Federation pertaining to higher education admissions. When faced with an ambiguous situation, the professional should seek clarification from their immediate supervisor or the designated admissions committee, rather than making an assumption. The process should be documented meticulously, detailing the steps taken, the regulations consulted, and the rationale for the final decision. This ensures accountability and provides a clear audit trail for any future review. Question 13. What factors determine an applicant's eligibility for admission to Altai State Pedagogical University, considering the regulatory framework of the Russian Federation's higher education system and the university's official admission policies? Option A. The applicant's ability to articulate their future career aspirations and demonstrate leadership potential during an interview. Option B. The strength of personal recommendations from teachers and the applicant's perceived passion for teaching, as assessed by the admissions committee. Option C. The applicant's social background and the presence of informal connections within the university administration. Option D. The applicant's scores on entrance examinations, recognized academic achievements, and adherence to any legally established preferential admission quotas, as outlined in the official admission rules of Altai State Pedagogical University and federal legislation. The correct answer is D. The applicant's scores on entrance examinations, recognized academic achievements, and adherence to any legally established preferential admission quotas, as outlined in the official admission rules of Altai State Pedagogical University and federal legislation. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge for an aspiring student at Altai State Pedagogical University by requiring them to navigate the foundational principles of educational policy and student rights within the specific context of Russian Federation educational law, as applied to university entrance. The core difficulty lies in identifying the legally binding criteria for admission, distinguishing them from discretionary or preferential considerations, and understanding the principle of equal opportunity and access to higher education. A deep understanding of the federal law on education in the Russian Federation and related Altai State Pedagogical University admission regulations is crucial. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the official admission rules published by Altai State Pedagogical University, which are derived from federal legislation. These rules will clearly outline the objective criteria for admission, such as exam scores, the presence of specific academic achievements, e.g., Olympiad victories recognized by the Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation, and the established quotas for various categories of applicants, Adhering to these published criteria ensures fairness, transparency, and compliance with the legal framework governing higher education admissions in Russia, upholding the principle of equal access. An incorrect approach would be to rely on informal recommendations or personal connections. This directly violates the principle of equal opportunity enshrined in Russian educational law, which mandates that admission be based on merit and objective criteria. Such an approach undermines the integrity of the admission process and could lead to legal challenges. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize subjective factors not explicitly listed in the official admission regulations, such as perceived potential or suitability for the teaching profession without a clear, legally defined basis. While these qualities are important for a future educator, they cannot be the primary determinants for university entrance if they are not incorporated into the objective scoring or evaluation mechanisms established by the university and compliant with federal law. This introduces arbitrariness and can lead to discrimination. A further incorrect approach would be to assume that all applicants are treated identically without considering legally mandated preferential admission rights. Russian law provides for specific categories of applicants who may have preferential rights to admission, such as winners of certain Olympiads or individuals from specific social groups. Ignoring these legally established preferences would be a failure to comply with the law. The professional decision-making process for a prospective student in this situation involves 1. Consulting the official admission regulations of Altai State Pedagogical University for the current academic year. 2. Cross-referencing these regulations with the federal law on education in the Russian Federation and any relevant decrees from the Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation. 3. Identifying all objective admission criteria, including required exam scores, the weight of entrance examinations, and any recognized academic achievements that grant advantages. 4. Understanding any legally established preferential admission rights and the documentation required to claim them. 5. Focusing efforts on meeting these objective criteria and preparing thoroughly for entrance examinations. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows that Ivan's submitted essay for the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam demonstrates excellent narrative flow and persuasive argumentation, but contains several demonstrable inaccuracies regarding the historical development of the Altai region. Considering the university's commitment to admitting candidates who can uphold educational standards, how should the admissions committee best proceed with evaluating Ivan's application? Option A. Grade the essay solely on its literary merit and persuasive qualities, overlooking the factual inaccuracies as minor issues that can be addressed later in his studies. Option B. Disqualify Ivan's application immediately due to the presence of factual errors, as this indicates a lack of preparedness for academic study at a pedagogical university. Option C. Request Ivan to resubmit the essay with corrected factual information before proceeding with the evaluation of his application. Option D. Acknowledge Ivan's strong writing skills while noting the factual inaccuracies in the essay, and proceed with a holistic review of his application, considering other components of his academic record and potential for growth. The correct answer is D. Acknowledge Ivan's strong writing skills while noting the factual inaccuracies in the essay, and proceed with a holistic review of his application, considering other components of his academic record and potential for growth. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a prospective student, Ivan, has submitted an application for the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam. Ivan's application includes a personal essay that, while demonstrating strong writing skills, contains several factual inaccuracies regarding historical events relevant to the Altai region. The challenge lies in balancing the assessment of writing proficiency with the requirement for factual accuracy in an academic context, especially for a pedagogical university where future educators are expected to impart correct information. The university's admission guidelines emphasize both academic merit and the candidate's potential to uphold educational standards. The correct approach involves acknowledging Ivan's writing talent while also addressing the factual inaccuracies. This means evaluating the essay based on its structure, clarity, and argumentation, but also noting the deviations from established historical facts. The university's regulatory framework for entrance exams as outlined in the Altai State Pedagogical University Admission Regulations, mandates that all submitted materials must reflect a candidate's genuine understanding and preparedness. For a pedagogical institution, this includes a foundational grasp of the subject matter. Therefore, a balanced assessment that recognizes writing skill while flagging factual errors aligns with the university's objective of admitting students who can contribute positively to the educational environment. This approach ensures that the evaluation is comprehensive and adheres to the principles of academic integrity. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the writing quality and overlook the factual errors. This would fail to uphold the university's commitment to academic rigor and could lead to admitting a student who may not possess the necessary factual grounding for teaching. Such an oversight would contravene the spirit of the Altai State Pedagogical University Admission Regulations, which implicitly require candidates to demonstrate a degree of factual accuracy in their submissions. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify Ivan based on the factual errors, without considering the essay's strengths in other areas. While factual accuracy is important, the entrance exam also aims to identify potential and diverse talents. A rigid adherence to absolute factual perfection in a personal essay, without considering the context of a writing assessment, might overlook a candidate with strong potential for development. This would be an overly punitive interpretation of the admission guidelines, which are designed to be holistic. A third incorrect approach would be to accept the essay as is, assuming that factual correction is something that can be addressed during the course of study. While remediation is a part of education, the entrance exam serves as a primary filter for foundational knowledge and preparedness. Ignoring significant factual errors at this stage would undermine the purpose of the entrance examination as a measure of readiness for higher education. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a multifaceted evaluation. First, thoroughly review the candidate's submission against all stated criteria for the entrance exam, including both qualitative e.g. writing style, argumentation, and quantitative e.g. factual accuracy, adherence to prompts aspects. Second, consult the specific regulatory framework and admission guidelines of the institution to understand the weighting and importance of each criterion. Third, consider the nature and severity of any discrepancies. Are the errors minor slips or fundamental misunderstandings? Fourth, determine if the identified issues can be addressed through further assessment or if they represent a disqualifying deficiency. Finally, document the evaluation process and the rationale for the decision, ensuring transparency and fairness. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals that a significant number of students in a particular faculty are struggling to meet the minimum academic performance standards, leading to higher than average attrition rates. The study suggests this may be linked to the teaching methodologies employed and the availability of supplementary academic support resources. The university's internal regulations emphasize maintaining high academic standards while also promoting student success and providing a supportive learning environment. Which of the following actions best reflects a responsible and ethical response to these findings, adhering to the university's regulatory framework? Option A. Initiate a formal review process involving faculty, students, and academic advisors from the affected faculty to thoroughly analyze the study's findings, identify root causes, and develop targeted, evidence-based solutions. Option B. Publicly acknowledge the study's findings and attribute the low performance to a lack of student motivation, encouraging students to seek external tutoring services. Option C. Immediately revise the curriculum and teaching methods in the affected faculty and allocate additional resources for academic support services based on a preliminary review of the study's recommendations. Option D. Implement a stricter grading policy across all faculties to ensure that only the most academically capable students progress, thereby addressing the efficiency concerns raised by the study. The correct answer is C. Immediately revise the curriculum and teaching methods in the affected faculty and allocate additional resources for academic support services based on a preliminary review of the study's recommendations. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict between the university's commitment to academic integrity and the practical pressures of student enrollment and retention. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing institutional goals with ethical obligations to students and the integrity of the educational process. The university administration must make a judgment call that upholds its values while acknowledging operational realities. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based review of the study's findings, focusing on identifying systemic issues rather than individual blame. This approach aligns with the principles of fairness and due process, ensuring that any interventions are proportionate and aimed at improvement. It also respects the regulatory framework of Altai State Pedagogical University, which implicitly mandates a commitment to quality education and ethical conduct in all its operations. This involves consulting relevant internal policies and potentially external educational standards that guide academic assessment and student support. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement punitive measures against students or faculty based solely on the study's initial findings without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge that efficiency metrics can be influenced by various factors, some of which may be beyond individual control. It also risks creating a climate of fear and distrust, undermining the university's educational mission. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the study's findings entirely without a proper review, which would be a dereliction of the university's responsibility to monitor and improve its educational quality, and could violate internal governance procedures. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on superficial changes that do not address the root causes identified by the study, thereby failing to achieve genuine improvement and potentially wasting resources. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, understanding the problem comprehensively by analyzing all available data and context. Second, identifying potential solutions that are ethically sound and aligned with institutional values and regulations. Third, evaluating the potential impact of each solution on students, faculty, and the institution. And finally, implementing the chosen solution with clear communication and a plan for ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals that the current admissions process at Altai State Pedagogical University is experiencing significant delays in processing applications, leading to a backlog and potential applicant dissatisfaction. The study suggests that streamlining the initial document verification stage could significantly improve processing times. However, the proposed streamlining involves a shift towards automated initial screening of certain documents, which might reduce the direct human oversight in this preliminary phase. Considering the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations and the university's commitment to selecting well-qualified future educators, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the proposed automated initial screening immediately to address the efficiency concerns, with a plan to review its effectiveness after a full admissions cycle. Option B. Introduce the automated screening without any prior testing or review, assuming that efficiency gains will inherently lead to better outcomes for the university. Option C. Reject the proposed automation due to the potential reduction in human oversight, and instead focus on hiring additional administrative staff to manually process applications faster. Option D. Conduct a pilot program for the automated initial screening on a subset of applications, meticulously documenting its accuracy and fairness against established criteria, and then present findings for approval before full implementation. The correct answer is A. Implement the proposed automated initial screening immediately to address the efficiency concerns, with a plan to review its effectiveness after a full admissions cycle. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict between the university's pedagogical goals and the practical implementation of its admissions process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the stated mission of Altai State Pedagogical University with the need for fair and transparent admissions, all within the specific regulatory framework governing higher education in the Russian Federation, as interpreted by the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam guidelines. The core tension lies in how to address identified inefficiencies without compromising the integrity of the selection process or violating established admission criteria. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the admissions process, focusing on identifying specific bottlenecks and proposing evidence-based, compliant solutions. This approach prioritizes adherence to the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations, which likely outline procedures for admissions, candidate evaluation, and the use of assessment tools. Any proposed changes must be evaluated against these regulations to ensure they do not introduce bias, unfairly disadvantage applicants, or deviate from the established academic and professional standards for teacher training. The ethical imperative is to maintain fairness and equal opportunity for all prospective students. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering the impact on fairness would be professionally unacceptable. This would violate the principle of equitable access to education and could lead to the selection of less suitable candidates, undermining the university's pedagogical mission. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established review procedures or implementing ad hoc changes without proper validation risks introducing errors, inconsistencies, and potential legal challenges, all of which are contrary to sound administrative and ethical practice within the Russian higher education system. Such actions could also be seen as a disregard for the established governance and oversight mechanisms of the university. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulations and university policies. This should be followed by a data-driven analysis of the identified problem, leading to the development of multiple potential solutions. Each solution must then be rigorously evaluated for its compliance with regulations, its ethical implications, its potential impact on the university's mission, and its feasibility. The chosen solution should be the one that best achieves the desired efficiency gains while upholding the highest standards of fairness, transparency, and academic integrity. Question 17. The efficiency study reveals that a particular section of the Altai State Pedagogical University entrance examination, designed to assess critical thinking skills, has consistently yielded lower scores for a specific demographic of applicants compared to others, despite no apparent difference in their overall academic potential, as indicated by other examination components. The admissions committee is tasked with deciding how to address this discrepancy for the current admissions cycle. Option A. Propose an immediate adjustment to the scoring of that specific examination section for the affected demographic, effectively lowering the required score for them to pass, to ensure a more diverse intake. Option B. Suggests that the university implement a supplementary interview process for applicants from the affected demographic to gauge their critical thinking abilities, bypassing the problematic examination section. Option C. Advocate for the exclusion of scores from that particular examination section for all applicants in this cycle, relying solely on other components of the entrance examination for admissions decisions. Option D. Recommend a review of the examination section's design and scoring rubric to identify potential biases and ensure it accurately reflects critical thinking skills across all applicant demographics, while proceeding with admissions based on the current examination results and established university criteria. The correct answer is D. Recommend a review of the examination section's design and scoring rubric to identify potential biases and ensure it accurately reflects critical thinking skills across all applicant demographics, while proceeding with admissions based on the current examination results and established university criteria. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict between the university's pedagogical goals and the practical implementation of its admissions process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the pursuit of academic excellence with fairness and adherence to established university regulations. The admissions committee must make a judgment call that impacts prospective students' futures, while upholding the integrity of the Altai State Pedagogical University's entrance examination framework. Careful consideration of the university's internal regulations and ethical principles governing admissions is paramount. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the university's official admissions policy and the specific guidelines for the entrance examination. This policy likely outlines criteria for evaluating applicants, including the weight given to different components of the examination and any provisions for exceptional circumstances. Adhering to these established procedures ensures that the decision is based on objective criteria and is defensible within the university's regulatory framework. This approach prioritizes fairness, transparency, and consistency, which are fundamental ethical principles in any selection process. An incorrect approach would be to deviate from the established admissions policy based on anecdotal evidence or personal bias. For instance, prioritizing a candidate solely because they are known to a faculty member, without a formal review of their examination performance against the stated criteria, violates principles of fairness and meritocracy. Another incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily lower the passing threshold for a particular candidate without a clear, documented justification that aligns with university regulations. This undermines the credibility of the examination process and could lead to accusations of favoritism or unfairness. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the results of the efficiency study entirely and proceed with the admissions process as if no issues were identified, failing to address potential systemic problems that could impact the quality of incoming students. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, understanding the problem and its potential impact. Second, consulting the relevant university regulations and policies. Third, gathering all necessary objective information. Fourth, evaluating the situation against the established criteria. And finally, making a decision that is both compliant with regulations and ethically sound, with clear documentation of the rationale. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a prospective student applying for admission to Altai State Pedagogical University via the entrance examination has submitted their application with a critical document missing due to a sudden, documented family emergency that occurred just prior to the submission deadline. The applicant has provided evidence of the emergency and requests a brief extension to submit the missing document. What is the most appropriate course of action for the University Admissions Committee? Option A. Immediately reject the application due to the incomplete submission, as per the strict deadline stipulated in the entrance examination guidelines. Option B. Allow the applicant to proceed with the examination without the missing document, with the understanding that it must be submitted at a later, unspecified date. Option C. Grant the applicant a short, clearly defined extension to submit the missing document, provided the documentation of the emergency is verified, and the extension does not compromise the overall examination timeline or fairness to other applicants. Option D. Advise the applicant to reapply for the next admission cycle, as the deadline for the current cycle has passed. The correct answer is C. Grant the applicant a short, clearly defined extension to submit the missing document, provided the documentation of the emergency is verified, and the extension does not compromise the overall examination timeline or fairness to other applicants. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for educational institutions, balancing the need for academic rigor with the practicalities of student support and fair assessment. The Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, would typically emphasize principles of fairness, transparency, and adherence to established academic standards. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these principles when faced with a situation that could be perceived as an exceptional circumstance. A deep analysis requires understanding the university's commitment to its entrance examinations' integrity and the ethical obligations towards applicants. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the applicant's situation against the established entrance examination criteria and procedures, seeking clarification from relevant university departments if ambiguities exist, and making a decision based on documented evidence and university policy. This upholds the integrity of the examination process, ensures fairness to all applicants by applying consistent standards, and demonstrates adherence to the university's regulatory framework. It prioritizes objective evaluation over subjective interpretation or immediate emotional response. An incorrect approach would be to immediately grant an exception based on the applicant's stated personal difficulties without a formal review process. This undermines the established entrance examination procedures and could lead to accusations of favoritism or unfairness from other applicants who met the requirements without special consideration. Bypasses the university's established governance and decision-making protocols. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the applicant's request outright without any consideration or attempt to understand the circumstances, which could be seen as lacking empathy and potentially violating principles of due process if the university has any provisions for exceptional circumstances. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the decision to an unqualified individual, such as a junior administrative staff member, without proper oversight or adherence to established university policy, which compromises accountability and the validity of the decision. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes 1. understanding the relevant university regulations and policies governing entrance examinations. 2. Gathering all necessary information and documentation related to the applicant's situation. 3. Consulting with appropriate university authorities or committees responsible for admissions and examinations. 4. Making a decision based on objective criteria and established procedures, ensuring transparency and fairness. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the final outcome. Question 19. The efficiency study reveals that a significant number of first-year students at Altai State Pedagogical University are at risk of academic probation due to lower-than-expected performance in foundational courses. The university administration is concerned about retention rates. Which of the following actions best aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity and student support, as per its internal regulations and pedagogical principles? Option A. Placing all students identified as at risk on immediate academic probation with a warning that any further decline will result in expulsion, without offering any additional academic support or counseling. Option B. Adjusting the grading scale for foundational courses to allow more students to pass, thereby improving retention statistics without altering teaching methodologies or support structures. Option C. Implementing a mandatory, university-funded tutoring program for all students identified as at risk, coupled with a review of their academic progress by a faculty advisor to identify specific areas for improvement and potential course adjustments. Option D. Recommending that students at risk of academic probation take a leave of absence for a semester to reassess their commitment to their chosen field of study, without providing resources to help them overcome their current academic challenges. The correct answer is C. Implementing a mandatory, university-funded tutoring program for all students identified as at risk, coupled with a review of their academic progress by a faculty advisor to identify specific areas for improvement and potential course adjustments. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict between the university's commitment to academic integrity and the practical pressures of student retention. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing institutional goals with ethical obligations to students and the integrity of the educational process. The university must uphold its standards while also supporting student success, a delicate equilibrium. The correct approach involves a nuanced understanding of the university's internal regulations and pedagogical principles. It requires identifying students who are genuinely struggling and require additional support, rather than simply focusing on superficial metrics. This approach prioritizes academic development and ethical assessment, aligning with the core mission of an educational institution. Specifically, it would involve implementing targeted academic support programs, offering counseling services, and providing opportunities for remediation, all within the established framework of Altai State Pedagogical University's academic policies. This upholds the principle of fair assessment and student welfare. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate retention by lowering academic standards or overlooking genuine academic deficiencies would be ethically unsound. This undermines the value of the degree and misrepresents the student's actual capabilities. It violates the university's commitment to producing graduates with demonstrable knowledge and skills. Another incorrect approach, which involves punitive measures without offering support, fails to acknowledge the complex factors that can lead to academic difficulty and is contrary to a supportive educational environment. This would also likely contravene internal university guidelines on student support and academic progression. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, thoroughly understanding the university's specific academic regulations and student support policies. Second, assessing the individual circumstances of students exhibiting academic difficulties. Third, consulting with relevant academic advisors, student support services, and faculty. And finally, implementing interventions that are both supportive of student success and uphold academic integrity, as defined by the university's framework. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential breach of examination protocol during a recent Altai State Pedagogical University entrance exam, specifically concerning the distribution of supplementary materials. The feedback suggests that some applicants may have received unauthorized assistance. What is the most appropriate initial step for the university's admissions committee to take in response to this information? Option A. Immediately disqualify all applicants suspected of receiving unauthorized assistance based on the initial feedback. Option B. Publicly announce that all feedback regarding examination irregularities is being disregarded to maintain exam confidence. Option C. Contact the stakeholders directly and request specific, verifiable proof before any internal action is considered. Option D. Initiate a formal review process to investigate the reported irregularities, gathering all relevant evidence and consulting the university's examination regulations. The correct answer is A. Immediately disqualify all applicants suspected of receiving unauthorized assistance based on the initial feedback. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the Altai State Pedagogical University's entrance examination regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to address potential irregularities reported by stakeholders with the imperative to uphold the integrity and fairness of the examination process, as defined by the university's internal guidelines, and the broader educational regulatory framework governing entrance exams in the Russian Federation. A hasty or biased response could undermine the credibility of the exam, lead to appeals, and damage the university's reputation. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based investigation that adheres strictly to the established procedures for handling examination irregularities as outlined by Altai State Pedagogical University. This means initiating a formal review process, gathering all relevant documentation and testimony, and making a determination based on the facts and the university's internal regulations. This approach is justified by the principle of due process and the need for procedural fairness, ensuring that any decisions are objective and defensible. It aligns with the overarching goal of educational institutions to maintain high standards of academic integrity and to ensure that all applicants are assessed equitably. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the feedback without investigation. This fails to acknowledge the university's responsibility to its stakeholders and to the integrity of its admissions process. It also risks overlooking genuine issues that could compromise the fairness of the exam. Another incorrect approach would be to act solely on the basis of the initial feedback without corroborating evidence or following established procedures. This could lead to unfounded accusations or unfair penalties, violating the rights of the applicants and potentially leading to legal challenges. Furthermore, the approach that involves prejudging the situation or allowing personal bias to influence the investigation would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure, undermining the impartiality required in such matters. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objectivity, adherence to established procedures, and thorough documentation. This involves 1. Acknowledging and formally recording the stakeholder feedback. 2. Consulting the relevant Altai State Pedagogical University regulations concerning examination integrity and dispute resolution. 3. Initiating a fact-finding process to gather all necessary information, which may include reviewing exam materials, interviewing relevant personnel, and examining any submitted evidence. 4. Applying the university's established criteria for evaluating irregularities. 5. Making a decision based solely on the gathered evidence and regulatory framework. 6. Communicating the decision and the rationale clearly and transparently, following the university's established protocols.